All right, I need everybody to do this. I need you to pull out your left or right hand. I need you to do this. I need you to touch your thumb to one of your digits or fingers. Probably, it doesn't matter. I just need everybody to do this. Here's why. Is everybody doing this? Yeah. If you can do this, the good news is you're a primate. Only primates can do this. This is the distinguishing characteristic of a primate. You have what's called the opposable thumb. You know this, right? And the reason this is important is because some of you have doubts about your children. And when you go home from the conference, you can say, honey, can you do this? And sure enough, they're a primate. That's going to be a good news. That's going to be a revelation when it comes to some of your kids. Now, the great thing about you can stop now, okay? The great thing about the opposable thumb is it has allowed, you know this, the human race, the human beings, to accomplish things that the rest of the animal kingdom can't do. I mean, there's our brain, yeah. But in terms of just being able to do this one simple thing has allowed us to progress in areas that it's just unimaginable for the rest of the animal kingdom. This is all about this just the ability to do this has enabled us to achieve and to experience progress that would be absolutely impossible, even with our brains, if we couldn't simply do this. This is so amazing. With your thumb and forefinger, you can exert just the right amount of pressure to pick up a contact lens, or you can pick up a baseball, and if you were so inclined and so talented, throw a 90-mile-an-hour fastball simply by the pressure exerted with those same fingers. That's absolutely amazing. And what allows you to make progress and what has allowed the human race to make progress is simply this. We are able to manifest just the right amount of pressure at the right amount of time. And as long as we are able to do this and control this, this results in extraordinary progress for the human race. But this is also an illustration of something that happens in your organization every single day, every single month, every single year. This represents pressure. This represents tension. And just as if you were to strap your thumb to the side of your hand and strap both of your thumbs to the side of your hands and lose the opportunity to create that energy and create that pressure and create that tension, you would lose the ability to make progress as an individual. So what I want to talk to you about for the next few minutes is the tension in your organization, the pressure that you oftentimes feel in your organization, and what to do about it. Now, bottom line is simply this. Tension is a necessity for any organization that wants to make progress. Unresolved tension is something is just a common everyday factor that's never going away for any organization that wants to make progress. And the problem is this: if you study organizations, or if you love organizations, or if you read about organizational life, or if you're ever around a great leader, the tendency is to think this, that great leaders solve all the problems and resolve all the tensions. They solve all the problems and they resolve all the tension. The truth is, great organizations don't solve all the problems and they don't resolve all the tensions. Great organizations learn to use the necessary tension in organizational life for the sake of progress. And if you accidentally make the mistake of trying to solve all the problems and resolve all the tension, the result is not something good. The result is the loss of the ability to leverage a very, very important thing in organizational life that allows you to make progress. If you have your workbook, I want you to turn to page 90. We're going to fill in a few blanks. Page 90, we're talking about the opposable leader. Page 90, we're going to start with Roman numeral 1. We'll jump right in. Roman numeral 1, page 90. You with me? Good. All right, here we go. Every organization that's business, profit, non-for-profit, parachurch, church organization, every organization has problems that shouldn't be solved. You want to fill in that blank. And tensions that shouldn't be resolved. Every organization has problems that should not be solved and tensions that shouldn't be resolved. Doing so, to solve all of those problems and resolve all those tensions, it would be the equivalent of cutting off your thumb. Here's some illustrations. Let me kind of set up these tensions for you. For example, think about the tension between fulfilling all of your responsibilities at work and all of your responsibilities at home. Anybody live with that tension? Fulfilling all of your responsibilities at work and all of your responsibilities at home. What would it look like to totally, fully, and finally resolve that tension? As we're going to see in a minute, not only is it impossible, it wouldn't even be healthy. Here's one. What about the tension between excellence or careful stewardship Excellence, let's do everything with excellence. No. Let's don't spend any money that's not absolutely critical to spend. There's a tension. How about this one? If you're in business, research and development versus sales. One group says, no, we need more research and development. Another group says, no, we need to hire a larger sales force. And all of a sudden, there's tension. The tension between management, leadership, systems, or flexibility. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. How about this one? The tension between allowing the preacher to go and preach as long as he wants to preach and, lean into the leading of the Holy Spirit, or letting out on time so the preschool volunteers don't all quit. What about that tension? Do we allow the preacher to go with the leading of the Holy Spirit and preach as long as he or she wants to preach? Or do we lean into the fact that the volunteers say kids only have a short attention span and when church needs to get out on time? What do you do with that attention? What about attracting and involving unchurched people versus nurturing mature believers? You ever run into that tension? Local outreach versus global outreach. Leading people versus shepherding people. Building a new facility on your campus or caring for the poor. Numeric growth or maturity. All of these represent tensions, pressure points within our organizations, and at some level we deal with them all the time, and the temptation is to try to come up with a system or an answer that solves all of those problems and resolves all of those tensions. Letter B. But if you resolve any of those tensions, you will create new tension. If you resolve any of those tensions that I just mentioned, if somehow in your organization, if they're appropriate or relevant, any of those tensions go away, you resolve them fully and finally once and for all, you create a harsher climate for getting things done. You impede progress. For example, what happens, think with me, if you opt for excellence to the neglect of sound financial principles in your church or organization? What if you opt for excellence? That is, I don't care how much it costs. We want the best of the best. We want excellence. Don't talk to me about budgets. Don't talk to me about line items. Don't talk to me about how much money we have. We just want excellence at all costs. What happens to your organization if you try to resolve that tension once and for all? But what happens if you go the other way? I don't want us to spend one unnecessary dollar. What happens if you go that way? You see, if you try to resolve these kinds of tensions and you don't create the third category that we're going to talk about for a few minutes, you end up spending so much time and energy trying to solve problems that should not be solved and resolve tensions that should not be resolved that you end up wasting a whole lot of time and manpower. How about this one? What happens if you are all theology and no application? You become Presbyterian. Okay, that was bad. Okay, what about this? What if you opt to let the Spirit lead the length of the service to the neglect of the children's ministry? Become Baptist, that's right. And what if you opt for reaching outsiders to the neglect of maturing believers? You become a megachurch. Okay, let's move on. Okay, here's the problem. Here's what happens. Here's the deal. Okay, I'm just being silly. Okay, so make sure you wait. Here's the deal. If you cut off your thumb, you feel the effects immediately. If you cut off your thumb, you immediately realize my progress is going to be impeded. But if you have an organization that is bent on constantly resolving all the tension and not having the third category, if you're in an organization that constantly feels like maybe you're a peacemaker, maybe your pastor's a peacemaker, your CEO's a peacemaker, you're led by men and women, or you fall into this category where you are so conflict adverse, you're so tension adverse that everything has to be solved and resolved, over time, that becomes the enemy to the progress or the mission or the vision of your organization. Letter C, if you resolve any of those tensions, you create a barrier to progress. Letter D, progress depends not on the resolution of those tensions, but on the successful management of those tensions. Now, what I want to talk about for the rest of our time together is two things, is how to identify what are problems that shouldn't be solved, and secondly, what your responsibility is as a leader when it comes to creating the third category that we're going to talk about. Roman numeral 2 in your notes, to distinguish between problems to solve and tensions to manage, here are 3 questions to ask. To distinguish between problems that need to be solved, I don't want to hear about this again, versus tensions that need to be managed. Tensions that are never, ever going to go away. Tensions that are absolutely necessary if we're going to make progress in the organization. Here's 3 questions to ask. Letter A, does this problem or tension keep resurfacing? Does this problem or tension continue to resurface or keep resurfacing? See, in your meetings, one of the things that frustrates you as a leader, one of the things that frustrates you as a pastor, a student pastor, is you have a meeting and suddenly people are asking the same questions they asked 3 months ago, and you're so frustrated because in your mind you're thinking, we've already talked about this. Why does this keep coming up? Why does this keep raising its ugly head? And the answer is, you have just stumbled upon a tension that should not be resolved, a problem that shouldn't be solved. You've just discovered one of the keys to probably progress in your organization. You know, for us in church world, and I don't know if this is true in your city, you know, every January, everybody goes to church in Atlanta. Part of our problem is we skip the last Sunday of the year. We just shut down the whole church. And so, you know, people kind of attend church on their own cycle, you know, twice a month, 3 times a month. Sometimes some people go every week in the month. So because we skip a year, the first few Sundays of January for us, probably true for you as well, first few Sundays of January are like, we are just slammed. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, we need more space and we need more services and, you know, we think we're like the greatest. And then we hit June. And it's like, what's wrong? What's wrong with the sermons? What's wrong with the staff? What's up? And every year we go through these cycles. And every year we have the same conversation. January, we need more space. June, we need better sermons. January, we need more space. June, and finally we realize, wait. This is just a tension to manage. These aren't problems to solve. Why? It just keeps coming up over and over. If there are things in your department, your division, your company, your organization, your profit, nonprofit, they just come up over and over and over. Chances are you have bumped into one of those things, a tension that is necessary, and as we're going to talk about, needs to be leveraged for the progress of your organization. Letter B, there are mature advocates on both sides. If there is a problem or tension in your organization and there are people that you trust and they're on both sides, that you find that they are nose to nose, eyeball to eyeball, constantly kind of battling this thing out, you know, pulling their weight and using their leverage in the organization to get their way, and they're sort of constantly at odds over the same issue, and these are people who are mature and people that you trust, chances are you've bumped into a tension you've got to manage. In our world, there's a group that's constantly pressuring us in the appropriate way. What are we going to do for the new believers? How do we mature these new believers? How do we disciple people more efficiently? How do we bring more people to maturity? Got another group over here. We got to keep it safe. We got to keep it simple. Let's don't make it complex. Let's don't get people too busy. We need to keep it simple. We need to keep it safe. I want to feel like I can always bring my unbelieving friends. How are we going to mature these new believers? We got to keep it simple. We got to keep it safe. And you know what? There are mature believers on both sides of that argument. Aha. This is not a problem to be solved. This is a tension we must learn as an organization to manage. And the third thing is this. Are the two sides, here's the question. Are the two sides of the tension, are they really interdependent? That is, are they actually leveraging each other in order to be a tension to begin with? For example, going back to that whole work-home conflict, if I decided to work all the time, eventually I would lose my family. But if I went home and never went to work, eventually I would lose my job. And then my family would tell me to get out of the house and get a job, right? So in reality, the home work tension that you feel, that you wish you could resolve, you could find the perfect schedule, you could fill everybody's love tank at home, and then you could fill everybody's satisfaction achievement tank at work, and everybody's love tank at home would be full, and all the kids have maximum amounts of your attention, and your boss thinks you're an overachiever. You know, you're looking for that perfect balance, you're looking for that perfect schedule. Good news is it doesn't exist. That is a tension that will never, ever go away. It should not be resolved. You have to learn to manage the tension, and that tension results in progress at home and at work. Now, number 3, here's your role in this whole dynamic. And as I'm talking, I know some of you are thinking, oh, wow, that just makes so much sense. That's like, those things keep coming up and over and over and over. Two people I trust are always going head to head. I tend to lean toward one more than the other, but I'm trying to keep everybody happy. What I want to do in these next few minutes is I want to help you create a third category. Not problems to solve, tensions to be resolved, but tensions to be managed. Because once you identify these in your organization, once you bring them front and center, once everybody realizes what's going on, you've created a third category, and I can tell you from experience, this will do wonders for your organizational culture. Roman numeral 3, the role of leadership is to leverage the tension to the benefit of the organization. That's your assignment. Is you've got to learn through your personality, your position, and your gifts to leverage these tensions for the benefit of the organization. Because these tensions result in progress when properly leveraged. 7 quick suggestions. Letter A. First, obviously, is to identify the tensions to be managed in your organization. And this isn't really hard to do. Is now that you have a third category, this isn't a problem to be solved. This isn't a tension to be resolved. This is a tension to manage. Now that there's a third category, to sit down and work through with your team members, hey, what are the tensions that in our organization, in our company, in our business, in our nonprofit, what are the tensions that aren't going away? And here's the key. What are the tensions that shouldn't go away that we have to learn how to properly manage? If you don't identify these tensions, you will spend hours trying to solve problems that can't be solved and shouldn't be solved. And if you are a peacemaker by nature, if you are a conflict avoider by nature, now listen, this is important, you will lean in the direction of bringing about peace and giving up the tension, which will impede progress, and you will make everybody happy temporarily, but you may undermine the strength of your entire church or organization. But even as a peacemaker, even someone that's conflict, that's shy of conflict, once you have a third category, it's going to give you a tool to leverage these tensions, identify the tensions. Then letter B is simply create terminology. Create new terminology. The terminology we use in our organization is simply this. This is a tension to manage. This is a tension we have to manage. This is a tension we have to manage. Let's just say that together. This is a tension we have to manage. One more time. This is a tension we have to manage. I'm telling you, in the midst of conflict, staff conflict, volunteer conflict, all of a sudden, bingo, it's like, whoa. We're trying to solve a problem that is actually tension we must learn to leverage. And you speak into your organization, you say, wait, whoa. This isn't a problem to solve. Say it with me. This is a tension we have to manage. Sorry about that. One more time. This is a tension we have to manage. Letter C. Inform your core. Inform your core. Years ago, I can't even remember, I want to say 5 years ago, I read a book called Polarity Management about this topic. Polarity Management. I don't think the book's, in fact, when I got the book, it was already out of print. There's some cool stuff on this guy's website, Polarity Management. I think the book's still out of print. And he has a very sophisticated scientific diagram that was honestly a bit confusing the first time I began to work through it. But when I was first introduced to this whole idea, we had a staff meeting with our entire staff. I said, look, this is a bit new to me. I don't love this terminology, but I've discovered something that I think we need to integrate into our culture, and we must all learn to speak the same language. And I informed our core, all of our leaders. I said, there's a third way. This isn't about you winning, and this isn't about you losing, or you winning and you losing. There are tensions in our organization we must all learn to manage. And we created a conversation, and we created a category, and we created terminology. Again, as I said, it's kind of the third way. Letter D, continually, and here's where it gets a little bit dicey for those of us in leadership, continually give value to both sides. Continually give value to both sides. Now, here's the deal. Whenever there's a conflict in your organization, you're a leader. You have an opinion, right? In fact, in many cases, we're the ones surfacing the conflict. We're the ones calling people in saying, hey, I don't know about, what was going on Sunday, or, are you sure that's the right way to do this? Or, why are people coming in so late? Or, whatever your deal is. So as a leader, we automatically have an opinion about every single conflict in our organization. Here's the other thing you need to know as a leader. Your words weigh 1,000 pounds, right? My assistant Diane can go down the hall and give somebody, in a different department some bad news. Her words weigh 100 pounds. If I go down the hall and say the same thing, my words weigh 1,000 pounds. Your words as a senior pastor, the youth pastor, whoever you are in authority, your words weigh more. So consequently, we must get in the habit, once we've identified what these tensions are, we must get in the habit, regardless of what our opinion is and regardless of where we tend to weigh in. I'll give you some illustrations in just a minute. We've got to learn to methodically and within the rhythm of our organization, give value or speak value into both sides. Letter E, same idea. Don't weigh in too heavily based on your personal biases. You give value to both sides, and you learn not to weigh in too heavily as based on your personal biases. For example, okay, you're the communicator. Well, you know what communicators think about how much time communicators should get? They think they should get more time, right? But you're the worship leader. And what does the worship leader think about how much time the worship leader? Well, the worship leader thinks, well, I should get more time than I have. And then and I don't know if in your church you had the education director. What about announcements? We need more time for now. How are we going to get people to do stuff if they don't even know what we're going to do? Now you have a three-way conflict, right? And then there's the volunteers. They're going, whoa. Children's attention span's about 15 minutes. We're giving you a whole hour. Don't you dare let the whole thing run over. I mean, what do you do with that? Well, the thing is, wherever you are in the organization, you have an opinion, and based on your giftedness and based on, this is huge, your individual responsibility, you have a bias when it comes to every single conflict and every single tension. But as a leader, you got to step up. And as a leader, you kind of got to buck up. And as a leader, you got to step away and decide, you know what? My goal is not to win. My goal is not to always resolve. My goal is to make sure, and this is hard, it's a new skill for some of us. My goal is to make sure that the important, progress, critical tensions never drop out of sight. Because here's what you can do as a leader accidentally. You can win the argument, trump all the other opinions, and cut off your thumb. And you'll win. And people won't argue because you're the boss. And you'll go, and you'll go home and say, honey, you should have seen me today. Woo, was I good? She said, and he said, and she said, and he said, and I had a zinger, and everybody was silent, and he's so wise. And I showed him, and I convinced him. Because there are tensions that are critical to progress, and if you as a leader don't learn to create, maintain, and keep front and center certain tensions, you become an impediment to progress. Here's what I wrote down in my notes. Understand the upside of the opposite side. Understand the downside of your side. You need to understand the upside of the opposite side. You need to understand and be able to verbalize the downside of your side. That means, communicators, you must learn to be a champion for worship. And worship leaders have to learn to become a champion for the spoken, preached word. And preachers, you've got to learn to be a champion for the integrity and the quality of what happens in student ministry and youth ministry. And education directors need to learn to become champions of the spoken word and the worship word. That if you're the point person, you must learn to be the champion of every single angle and every single perspective. Otherwise, your words will squash the conflict and you'll try to erase tension. And at the end of the day, progress is impeded. For me, I wrote down learning to appreciate I'll just tell you this story real quick. When we started the church, I've learned so much from Reggie Joyner. I know you have it as well. And I know in this environment, for many of us, Reggie is simply an MC. But I know Reggie's been to hundreds of your churches, and the whole Orange movement has been so powerful. But when we started North Point, I was way more concerned about the money we spent than the quality of the environments we created. I really was. I was so concerned because I woke up every day with the financial pressure. Is that important? Yes. Do you have to pay attention to budgets? Yes. Reggie is and was an expert at creating irresistible environments. But irresistible environments are expensive. And in the early years of North Point, there was this tension, and I would walk into his environments, and they would be spectacular, and what's the first thing I would think? How much did this cost? So here everybody's going, whoa, and I'm going, how much did this cost? And my words weigh 1,000 pounds. And my words and just my very presence in some of those in some of those environments had the potential to just squash what was happening, because it was like, how much did that cost? And I'd go to his environments, and we didn't have Bic pens. No, everybody had a Sharpie. I'm thinking, why does everybody have a Sharpie? Why don't we just go get plastic pens? Well, that's the way I lean. I still lean that way. I will always lean that way. And I had to learn to be a champion of quality, irresistible environments, even if they cost more money than I was comfortable with. Because if I erased that tension by having my way and being right, we wouldn't be where we are today. Because we have extraordinary environments, and they're expensive, and it still bothers me. But you know what you have to do as a leader sometime? You have to make sure that nobody wins and that the tension remains, and you learn to manage the tension. And I learned so much in those early days, and I'm so grateful that he had the patience I'm so grateful that he had the patience and the wisdom not to let me win those arguments too easily. And I'm so grateful that I stumbled upon the value of maintaining certain tension. Now, there's many illustrations of that, but that's just one. Letter F. Don't allow the strong personalities in your group to win the day. Don't allow the strong personalities in your group to win the day. If your education director is a stronger personality than your worship leader, and you let them battle it out, and you watch the worship leader just kind of fold up under the pressure of the words of the education director, and it looks like everything's resolved because your worship leader just shut down, that is not a win. You as a leader have failed to keep a very important tension alive in your staff meetings. Don't allow the strong personalities to win the day. The goal is to maintain these important tensions and to keep them front and center, and it is not a win when somebody wins. Now, I don't know what your leadership team is like, and my leadership team, it's probably a lot like yours, management team, there are people who talk, and there are people who never open their mouth. And I have learned and have had to learn to say, thank you. Kevin, talk. Just talk. I just want to know. You're thinking, I want those thoughts to come out of your mouth now. Talk. Because you can't let anybody win. The tension's got to be out there, and you as a leader have got to learn to leverage it. I wrote this in my notes. This isn't in yours. Here's what you need. You may want to write this down. You need passionate people who will champion their side. You need passionate people who will champion their sides, but you need mature people who understand this reality. You need mature people who understand this reality. You need passionate people that say, worship's important, preaching's important, children are important, students are important, missions is important, children are important, hungry children are important. You need passionate people that argue their side. You need mature people that understand this dynamic. And if you have somebody that just won't let it go, and if you have somebody that just can't embrace this third way, then you may need to move them out of your inner circle, because you can't afford to allow problems that should never be solved to become tensions that are ultimately resolved. And then here is probably the most important one of all, and I struggle trying to figure out how to say this accurately. Letter G is don't think in terms of balance, think rhythm. Don't think in terms of balance, think rhythm. And here's what I mean by that. When you hear a conversation like this, you think, oh, okay, so I'm going back to sort of our traditional struggle that some of us have on Sunday mornings, but this goes deep, deep, deep into the organization. So, okay, just think, if you start to think balance, you think this way. Okay, how many minutes did we give you? And how many minutes did we give you? And how many minutes did we give you? Or we think this way, how much money did you give them in their budget? How much money did you give them in their budget? How much money did you give them in their budget? Let's make sure it's all balanced. That's a terrible way to operate your organization. Don't think balance, think rhythm. There are times in the life of a church that you need more music than preaching. There are times in the life of a church that you need more preaching than music. There are times in the life of a church you need more celebration than content. There are times in the life of a church that you need more creativity than financial stewardship. And there are times in the rhythm of an organization that stewardship becomes preeminent. Don't think balance, think rhythm of the organization, because leadership, as you know, is far more art oftentimes than it is science. I wrote this in my notes. Balance means, equal amounts of time, equal amounts of money. Sometimes an organization needs more leadership than management. Sometimes the organizations, churches need more singing than preaching. And sometimes they need more theology than application, especially in times of tragedy. Sometimes we need to build children's space. Sometimes we need to build orphanages. There's a season for everything. And as a leader, you can't think balance, you think rhythm, and you keep these tensions front and center, and you're able to say to the people you have so much respect for, I've heard what you have to say. I value what you value, but right now, the emphasis has to be here. Don't shut down on me. Don't quit championing your cause. Continue to be a cheerleader. Continue to keep it in the conversation. But right now, we've got to do this, not for the sake of balance. Please don't try to be a fair leader. Just do the right thing in light of the season you're in as an organization and the rhythm of your organization. For us, it's so strange. Look about, we just celebrated 15 years as a church. And for the first 3.5 years, we did no outreach, no intentional evangelism, and we did almost nothing in our community at large. We almost did no evangelism, intentional evangelism. We did no outreach, almost no outreach events. And we did almost nothing in terms of community service. Because at that point in the life of our organization, what we needed was to train people for a completely different model of church. Were we balanced? Was it the right thing to do? Did we not value all those other things? That wasn't even the issue. The issue is, and was, at this season, this is what we must do. And there was pressure, but what about? And when are we going to? And when are we going to start a? And when are we going to start a this? And when are we going to start a that? And it's like, wait, we're for all those things. Keep them front and center. But at this time, in the life of our organization, this is what we must do. At the bottom of your notes is this statement. As a leader, one of the most valuable things that you can do for your organization is to differentiate between tensions your organizations will always need to manage versus problems that need to be solved. One of the most important things you can do as the leader is to help your organization differentiate between problems that need to be solved once and for all and the tensions that need to be managed constantly, and to build into your culture and your organization the terminologies that says, this is a tension we must learn to manage. And once you've identified them, leverage them, grow from them, because in some cases, they will be the key to progress in your